Anyway, we're going to be getting into it. We're reading The Design of Everyday Things, like kind of a seminal book for UX and for design. And as we're going through this, just wanted for everyone to remember, this is not going to be basically like a call and response kind of thing where I just ask questions and then have you all answer and whatnot. I really want this to be something that is, grassroots and really community driven. I mean, that's the whole thing that this is about, is community. So make sure that you turn your mic on as soon as you want to interject or to put something out there, but want to make sure that this is something that's really, really flowing with everybody. And so again, and before we get started, the last thing, I just want to thank Jason for this opportunity. He reached out to me because we were talking a bit earlier about just how much the User Defenders podcast has grown into the community. And so now it encompasses so many different things. To be able to do that, it had reached out for my help. And so, of course, I jumped on the opportunity because it's a real privilege for all the things that User Defenders has already given me, want to be able to give back as well. So, Jason, thank you so much for starting this whole shebang and for letting me be a part of it. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Ross, thank you, man. You're too kind. Dude, you have been a great contributor to the community, and we met in person, I think several months back when you were kind of feeling out Colorado to seeing if it was a place that you could transition into. And so we had a really awesome coffee, nice conversation. And I thought of you immediately when I was like, when I knew I needed to hand this over, like I just, it's a superhero theme, but the irony is superheroes can't do it all. That's why there's the Avengers. That's why there's the Justice League, right? They can't do it all on their own. So I realized that, and I'm so thankful, Ross, that you jumped on the opportunity, and I know that you're going to do an awesome job on these. So I couldn't be more thrilled to have you. So thank you for stepping up.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you. Well, that just goes to show too, that this community really does form community. So, we met online and then forming real life relationships. And so I hope that's the case, with y'all as well. So reaching out digitally, or if, we're in town, or, Jamie, we'll have to get together, you being so close in Colorado. And just saw that you came online. So thanks for being here. But the last note before we get to it is just a reminder that this is going to be recorded so that we'll be able to pass along to the folks that weren't able to be here. And so Jason, and I will work together on how to clean that up and to get it out there. But just a reminder that this is being recorded with our conversation. So with all that, I think we should go ahead and get into it. The seminal book, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. I was doing some research on it. It looked like it was written back in 1988, and then 25 years later, he revised it from The Psychology of Everyday Things to The Design of Everyday Things. And so 2013 is when that was written. And I really came across Don Norman because Vox did a video on YouTube one time called The Norman Door. And so basically those are doors that basically, if you go up to them, it looks like they have a handle on them, and it looks like you're supposed to pull. But when you do that, it catches and you're actually supposed to push. And that just kind of opened my eyes to the aspect of, design is in everything and everywhere. And even this summer I was at the Apple Visitor Center, and they had a Norman door. So to the bathroom, I was trying to push to go in. And it turns out you actually had to pull the door. And so I took a picture of it, and I thought, man, even Apple has, even misses the mark a little bit sometimes. But yeah, so if you hadn't read the book.
Apple, those crazy guys, they've got the Norman walls at their headquarters. The spaceship headquarters, all the walls are such clear glass, they had to put sticky notes on the walls to prevent workers from walking headlong into these clear walls.
That's true. That was happening.
Well, yeah, so there you go. Already, it didn't have the signifiers, so I had to put the signifiers up. But yeah, so if you folks haven't read the book, don't worry about that. Really, it's just kind of a jumping off point to kind of talk about all the things that the book encapsulates, which with this one, it's everything. So, but with that, just wanted to kind of open the stage to really kind of talk about, ask folks what your initial thoughts were. What's maybe something that you really got out of the book, or kind of a topic that the book talks on that you want to kind of springboard the conversation off on.
Yeah, I'll kick off. I know I've talked to Jason about this book a couple of times. This is a reread for me coming through this one. It was a required book in a technical writing and design class that every engineering major at the University of Colorado needs to take in their junior year. So I read it then, and this was the book that pointed me towards human factors engineering, as we call it in the aerospace world.
Oh, yeah.
And it pointed me in this direction for a career, and that's where I'm at right now. So for me, it was fabulous to go back and take a look and remind myself of some of the initial principles and philosophies that caused me to want to get back in or get into this field in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, I bet with aerospace, a lot of it comes up with that aspect of the kind of the root cause analysis and getting to the basis and not just saying, oh, somebody messed up whenever they were trying to use it, but really kind of take it that step further back. Is that the case in aerospace and using this stuff?
Yeah, very, very much so. We can start with, root cause analysis, but for me, what I do, I work for Maxar Technologies up in Longmont, and I design user interfaces for our satellite collection planning systems. So we do have a huge amount of,
Oh, Jamie, I think you cut out.
We lost him.
I think we might have.
That was so good, man.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to hear the rest.
I want to hear more about this.
Don't leave us hanging, man. We'll wait.
Yeah, I think he's on mute. Well, we can go back to that. Yeah, we can go back to that.
Double dunch him back in. He could.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to add with the door piece that there's another thing that's happening in New York, just to keep flow. So as quickly as people are moving from door to door, you're leaving the office and there's like multiple doors. Now a lot of businesses are keeping one door closed. And with New York, because of the elements, there's always like a double door to catch like all the wind and all of that for the winter. So you're going through double doors. You don't know which door is the one that's closed and which one's open. So it's like a constant like jam of traffic because you have to guess which clear door is actually working. And you go to restaurants and for your office and for everything. And I'm just like, I wish they would just just put a piece of paper and be like, this is the one that's working. We lock they're physically like locking the other door and everything's a double door. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the stickers would work there too. Even Don Norman that's an example he uses. He went around his building and put the little stickers, remember, on the keyhole to know which way to turn it. So yeah, we need a vigilante designer out there to just put that all over. Well, Jamie, it looks like you're back. Are you?
Do you guys have me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, there you are.
Awesome. I was driving back from a vet appointment for our Greyhound, and I think my Zoom clipped when I hit the Wi-Fi for our house.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what was the last thing you guys heard?
I think you're talking about you designing the user interface for satellite capturing systems.
Yes. So I helped design the systems for our collection planning segment for our company, for Maxar Technologies. And these are heads-up systems that our planners use to view all of the orders that our customers give us. And we fly imagery satellites. So they need to be able to see the orbital ground tracks of the spacecraft. They need to be able to see what the spacecraft is capable of, what kind of contacts with our antenna ground stations. And as we proceed with more and more complex missions, the challenges in designing an interface that is helpful, useful, and can provide the right type of information to the planner becomes more and more challenging. So I think where I was going with my original thought was, there was a question about whether or not we're using, some of this kind of concept in the fault tree analysis, when something went wrong. But we do have a very detailed approach to usability in the design phase.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, what's interesting is that human factors originated around aviation. Like this field, if we look back far enough, we'll actually see the origin story beginning in aviation during World War II. A lot of the planes were designed, they weren't designed well. And in fact, there were so many pilot deaths from them trying to navigate the aircraft, even with the controls. Like there was a lot of confusion between the flaps and the landing gear. So what was happening is, because there was really no signifiers and affordances for that control. A fellow named Alphonse Chapanis, who was like one of the first human factors folks around, kind of like looked at this and said, I can make this better. And what he did was, it was really simple. The solution was really, really simple. He simply put a wheel on the control that controlled the landing gear, and he put a triangle on the control that controlled the flaps. And so these aviators, they were able to distinguish which control without even having to take their eyes off of what they were doing, like just by simply touch. And that that was the beginning of human factors. And so I love that it all kind of started around aviation. And so that's why, Jamie, when you mentioned that you're doing that, I was like, man, this has come a long way, but that's where the beginning was. So I always love that story a lot.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you had said like things like signifiers and affordances, because that's really what I got out of this book. I think the most was really just having a common vocabulary to be able to talk with people with. So whenever I'm looking at good products or bad products and all that kind of stuff, I'm able to actually articulate what it is that I'm saying. And even going further back to the human error, there's one called, I guess it's Poka-yoke, but that aspect of just, really just designing so that something can't happen. But I had always known that as when I would go around and visit engineers in my previous job, I was talking with one, and her kind of catchphrase was, because it can, Bob. So whenever anybody would ever ask, why did this happen? The response is always, because it can, Bob. It's just, it happened because it had the ability to happen. So being able to kind of put some of those common vocabulary together, I think that's something that I really got out of this, is now able to be able to talk with folks and us be on the same page. And I think that's what's nice about this book for everyone. And, for Jamie, with it being a seminal read, because it makes them so that more folks can be on the same page earlier to be able to talk deeper into things, instead of having to kind of wade through, oh, what are you saying? What are you saying? But be able to kind of focus on that thing. So that's really one of the key takeaways I got from the book, was just having that common vocabulary moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Being a team lead, and especially in big companies, almost every single time it is, oh, what do? You do UX? Great. What is that? So whether you're managing up and trying to promote a feature or a piece of work, you have to be able to talk to it in a sense that they will understand, but also still elevate and educate, right? So I can't dummy down everything. And it gets to the point where you have to be careful of someone looking at you in a critical lens that you just made this stuff up. So you have to very easily be able to reference things. And I think that's one of the biggest thing about this book, is that even when I first started, this book was referenced. So it's good while you're educating your teams and you're preparing your team to present your designs, that you have points of reference when it could be a possible new feature or idea for that company or for your teams.
Yeah, especially you're talking about that kind of elevating aspect. That's really what I got out of the psychology piece. So I can definitely see why it used to be called the psychology of everyday things, because of how much psychology was in it. But especially, the aspects of memory and, just kind of like some of the psychological factors. That's something that I really think really elevates design, because a lot of the book and a lot of the things in the book seemed like common knowledge, but then really have kind of the backing of why it is that's the case, of, why memory is so important, how it is that we even kind of use memory as a crutch sometimes. So I used to really love the aspect of memory and memorizing, because I read a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, and it was about just memorizing and how that kind of, with information just being at our fingertips, hurts creativity. Because if you think about creativity being joining two seemingly disparate things, and then that's where creativity comes from, is where those two merge. If you don't have that kind of in the back of your mind, if you don't have that in your repository, you can't be creative and do that. And so that's why I was thinking about just how important knowledge was and memory. But then I kind of had a different perspective on it whenever I was reading that section on knowledge, where it just talks about how much we use different crutches that folks design for us are kind of out there, as far as using different constraints or conventions that we have on, not everything is open. There's only so many things you can do with a certain thing, or so many things that you can do you don't have to know everything, but you can use the kind of the signifiers or the crutches that people design into things to make things easier to use when you're out and about.
That point actually reminded me of a different book, a book called The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. He's a doctor from, I think, Harvard, but he's a very, very specialized surgeon. And the book talks about how he brought medical checklists to third world countries, and how when he got these doctors in triage situations to use basic checklists, to not rely on just pure memory, they were able to improve the quality of their diagnoses and therefore the treatment of their patients. So freeing up memory, freeing up your working memory, be it with checklists, or in our case, we're not always, I might write a checklist or two for my stuff, but if we free up the working memory for our users, we're enabling them to make the proper decisions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had a friend that would always talk about that. Apparently it's called the Zeigarnik effect, or I was trying to look at it a little bit this morning as well, where basically, if you have all this stuff, write it down, because that takes it off of your mind and frees it up. So we're much better able to remember things that have been interrupted than things that aren't. So it kind of goes into, like, if you're trying to learn something, maybe break it up a little bit. But I think it works the opposite way with what you're talking about, Jamie, of, if you write it down, it gets it off your mind. You don't remember it at all. And so that really frees you up. So I think that's a great point. Appreciate that. I'll have to look into that book. You said it's the Checklist.
The Checklist Manifesto.
Checklist Manifesto. All right. Neat.
I'll post a link in community.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Nice. And then I'll put under that the Norman Door video, and then maybe the link to Moonwalk with Einstein. Yeah, so if anybody has anything that they've talked about, feel free to use Jeremy's post to kind of keep going under it, as kind of like the show notes for this. Or what.
I want to suggest we use the chat inside of the group. I think, and that's credited to Tiffany. I didn't realize that we could actually have our own chat room inside of that group. And so we can just kind of keep this as a continuous thread. It doesn't have to just be one day or 1 hour. And like, we can continue to talk. We have new insights even after this, new insights about the book, new insights, things we've seen out in the world or whatever, like, that we can add to this conversation. Like, I really do. I love that idea, Tiffany. Let's keep the conversation going. This is a community. This is something that should be ongoing. So yeah, please post that in the chat inside of the group, the book club group.
All right, neat. There you go.
I would even like to pose a question, because, depending on the level that you're at in your careers, and if you're just diving into UX now, which I think is a large portion of the community, if you have questions on the book, so not just like insights, but also like, I didn't understand this, or you want to challenge a piece to it, I'd be really interested to see what the community thinks in those regards. I liked a lot of parts of it where it kind of reminds you all the responsibilities of design. When you're designing websites, it's so easy to fall into these patterns of, oh, everybody understands what the hamburger menu is. And they're going to get it. And then in my current role, our demographic is a lot older. So I like that this book made me think about, what is their lifestyle? Maybe they're not online all the time. Maybe they only shop every once in a while. Maybe they're using their husband's computers, things of that nature. And really putting it out there in plain text that if the user doesn't understand it, it's a design flaw. I think it's really easy for us to be like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to innovate off of that, and we're going to push the envelope even more because, as designers, that's what we're doing, we're innovating. But there's also a responsibility for designers to also just make it work for your audience. Otherwise, it is your responsibility, it is your fault. So, or the teams. And that's where I think we started with, is all these designs that we find in our everyday lives that literally are not working.
I like that a lot. It really makes me think about when we're doing research. Oftentimes, like, we'll see a problem from our point of view, but we can have tendencies to be biased, to not actually make sure that the problem we see is actually a problem with the people using it. Right. I think that, and that's kind of, I'm in a situation right now where we have a game at my work. We have an app. It's a game you can play on your app, or you can play it on the website through your desktop or mobile device. And the experiences are entirely disparate. They're completely, the way you play the game is completely different. But the people that use it and use it for their device, the ones that are really hardcore players, they get it and they do it. The challenge we're facing is we want more people. Here's the reality. We are doing pretty good advertising because we're getting like 5,000 registrants a month, 5,000 people registering to play this game a month. But it's like stunning how many of those people actually stay on. Most of those people play one time and then they leave.
There's like a drop off. Yeah.
But we have a lot of people that actually continue to play, and they continue to enjoy it. So we have a real big challenge. Like, we want the people that are registering to stay with us, but we also don't want to alienate the pro players, right? Like, that's kind of a big research challenge that I'm actually a part of right now, and trying to wrap my head around. And I'm going to actually doing some testing next week on this. But so, like, I guess to your point, Tiffany, it's really, we really need to drill into who that ideal persona is. And we can't know that until we talk to people, until we watch them use what we've designed. Right. And then we discover what the real problems are. And then, then there's that choice you make. It's like, do we want to alienate a little bit, take a risk and alienate the hardcore, like, pro players in order to keep some of these new folks on board? Or, like, where do we balance that out? That's a challenge that I'm facing right now. So you just think of that.
And then I also find that when we have, as designers, have insights of this or an aha moment like that, where it's like, no, literally we have two different groups and what do we want to do about it? Then the challenge is bigger, where do we have the capacity to serve both now that we're doing it? And if we don't, then we have to have like a strong business conversation. And I find that when designers are able to kind of be comfortable with the truth and just be like, no, this isn't a and or smash it together. We really should truly have personalized versions of both if we want to keep both communities. I think that's where I think a lot of the value comes, and being able to just like put it out there on the table.
That's interesting.
Because I think we sometimes drive ourselves crazy and boil the ocean to then be like, no, we're gonna please everybody. We're gonna totally serve everyone. When sometimes you just have to make a strong business decision and be like, this is what my UX research shows. This is what it means when we want to do both. Is that possible? Kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Jesse James Garrett who tweeted out recently, and I was trying to find it, but I don't know if I'll be able to, but he said, oh yeah, here it is. He said, the designer's first and most essential task is choosing the correct problem to solve, because if you get that wrong, every choice you make after that is irrelevant. And I think he's totally right. And then I was feeling, a little kind of like confrontational, I guess, that day, but I just not confrontational, but I was feeling a little argumentative. I said, well, yes, I totally agree. But how often are those problems chosen for us by executives and stakeholders? Yes. Right?
Yes. I find that I love to bask in the, well, I told you, like I feel comfortable that as long as everyone is aware of the cost and benefit of everything, and we're making a very clear decision and knowing what we're walking away from possibly, or what, like you said, alienating, then great. Then I did my job of really painting the picture of all the users and what those needs are. And then at the end of the day, a business is a business. So
yeah, keep your eyes on the business model for sure. Like, that's really should dictate how we're serving our users, how we're serving the business and the stakeholders and everybody else. Yeah.
And then you can go and take advantage of the part that I really liked at the end, which is the rise of the small. So you'd be like, great, you're not serving this community. I'm going to go and build my own little thing that will serve that community. I thought that was really great to put in there, and end with, a very nice encouraging. If you're not getting it where you are in business, then you can kind of make it yourself.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And that's Seth Godin's primary message, which in his latest book, This is Marketing, it's basically saying just go and serve the smallest viable audience, because there's somebody there. There's somebody out there for whatever it is whatever change you're trying to make, whatever difference you seek to make. And so I really like that. I think that's totally true, because the companies that seek to please and serve everybody, they really don't know what they're doing. They don't know who they're truly trying to serve, and they don't do a good job of it ultimately. And so I like that a lot, Tiffany. That's a great sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Y'all are touching on a point that I wanted to bring up and kind of talk about with that kind of comes out later in the book. But this design of everyday things, I think, is, in the perfect world, the pie in the sky, what it is that we look to achieve. But then kind of near the end, it talks about the aspects of where, quote unquote, it doesn't really work that way. Like when you actually put it in the real world in the business, it just doesn't really work that way. So what are some of the ways that y'all have seen in your work that we just deviate from kind of the tenets of what it is that we're supposed to, the book says that we're supposed to use? And so that's a question with me not having been in the workforce yet of UX, kind of was curious about are there just some things that it seems like you already touched on a couple, but it's just, we should be doing, it's mapped out what we should be doing with design of everyday things, but we just kind of deviate from that time and again.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly, Ross. Is it what are we deviating from? Can you
kind of what y'all are talking about of where in the real world, in the perfect world, we would come up first with the right problem and do a lot of work into that and then work off of that. But then, like you were saying, with a lot of what you're doing, the problem is brought to you instead, and so you don't know quite if that is the right problem or not. But just I think it's kind of around page 236 is where he kind of talks about where we deviate sometimes from the way that it really should work, as far as I don't know, just kind of moving this into the real world.
From big corporations and big business, you're only one team. So what ends up happening is every team has its own initiative. The marketing team has its own initiative. The business teams have their own initiative. The planning and finance team has their own initiative. And what happens is, as UX designers, we can throw all of those goals out of the water and just really focus on like, who is our audience and what are they doing and what do they want, which may not align with the business. Right. May be too costly for the finance team, maybe a risk for the marketing team, or the marketing team doesn't really actually like our audience, they like someone else. So what ends up happening is if you're designing for business, and I don't know if this speaks to this part of the book, but I know that sometimes you're asked to, because you are the design team, to design something that works directly against who you're trying to serve. And that's just what ends up happening until you are owning your own business and doing it from scratch in your team of one. But that happens a lot. I've been actually asked that today, and just to purposely make something harder. I was like, well, just hide it. Because I very, very easily can just get to the point that if this is something that you feel like you only want a portion of the audience to see, or you don't want to give it to everyone, to me, I'm change your program. When I say change someone's program and it has marketing and finance involved, then that's like millions of dollars sometimes, right? You got to email or send notification, you got to like work with the banks, you got to do all these things. They're like, just, hide it or make it harder. And that directly goes against everything I'm about. So that's going to happen, or they'll just go around your team regardless, go straight to the dev team and just build it however they want. So I think that happens a lot when you're working with big teams.
Do you guys think that Don Norman was a little hard on engineers in this book at all? Did you guys sense that? Or do you think he's just has some nice righteous indignation in kind of his argument here about good design?
As someone with an engineering degree, I did find his usual lilt on engineers to be accurate, not just a tiny bit condescending. Might not be the right word, but it's a vibe. And which is interesting for me because I love this book so much, and I'm willing to accept that level of talk down. Working in an aerospace industry and working with engineers who have this kind of idealized version of the system. They don't understand that some folk don't understand that at the end of the day, people need to interact with the system, and there's a prevailing culture in especially old tech like aerospace, where it's kind of a read the manual kind of tech or culture. It's like, look, if the mistake is made, it's not because I didn't design the interface properly, it's because you didn't read the manual. And that's kind of that's still in the process of flipping over in our industry. So I can definitely understand where he's coming from with his opinions on engineers.
I actually made notes when I was reading earlier in the book about a couple of the things that he said. And he said, the reasons for the deficiencies in human-machine interaction are numerous. Why? Because much of the design is done by engineers who are experts in technology, but limited in their understanding of people. And I think there's a couple of bullets here. The problem with the designs of most engineers is that they are too logical. We have to accept human behavior the way it is, not the way we wish it to be. It's them's possibly fighting words, potentially. But I think he's right about, I think there's truth to what he's saying. I've worked with engineers for 25 years. I love engineers greatly. They have superpowers in areas that I do not as a designer, and we need each other. Right. And so I have a lot of respect for engineers, but I do understand his sentiment, having worked with many, in that, especially when it comes down to deadlines, when it comes down to requirements, are the requirements met? Mm-hmm. Does it work functionally? If you can check the boxes on all three for a lot of engineers, then that's it. We're done. We're done with our part. Whether or not, maybe whether or not it actually works well for the people it's intended for. It may work right functionally, but it may be sorely lacking in some of the affordances and signifiers that Don Norman talks so much about in this book. That's just kind of my take. And I've experienced that firsthand. And it is a tug of war sometimes, right? There's a compromise that probably needs to happen on both sides, I think, on design and engineering quite often. And stakeholding.
There's a different wiring when you have to do that, or when you have the liberty to do that, right? So I don't necessarily only think that's engineers versus designers. I think that's just different professions, and that's basically they're everything. It checks all the boxes and it doesn't have to do this other piece. Our entire job is to worry about whether the user gets it or not, right? And that's kind of our focus, and we will even re-engineer something just to make sure that the user understands it. So I think you need both, and I'm not so much concerned about his stance, because I know that for a long time it was very hard to break that barrier. Just originally starting on the production team, where you had to be the in-between of like the dev team and truly creative like photo shoot team trying to figure out the website together, and having the design team constantly wanting to break the planes all the time and stuff like that. You had to be very like blunt about, why am I coming back to you with different requirements? Why am I making you dev this out? And it was hard for a while. I know most recently there's, Envision's putting all this money and all of this work behind making that collaboration between the two teams, and that's just happening now. So I'm not necessarily, it doesn't strike me, and I very much recognize it, because I know how irritating it is to have to resend work back through an engineering team, and it's very much like, I'm curious to probably learn more about that. To me, work is work, and all of a sudden our audience changed, or we're just naturally been engineered to know that, okay, I'm going to design this and it possibly may not test well, and then I'm going to be in iteration 54. Where for whatever reason, I'm curious to understand from the engineering side why that's so painful. I'm like, is this coding different than what you code yesterday? Like, you're constantly going to have to code something, and where that friction is for them to be like, okay, I already did this and now I have to like do it again in a different way.
Yeah, I guess that's where prototyping and user testing comes in, right? Because it's like there's two sides of the brain at work here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the left and right brain. And so it's kind of like, well, okay, what does the user say? How does the user interact with this thing? And then I guess that's the beauty of like low fidelity prototype testing before there's a lot of developing tax associated with a project, like spending hours and thousands building something that, first of all, A, like they may not even want, but B, may not even work, right? So it's like validating, first of all, the fact that it's a need. I think that's where a lot of businesses kind of get it wrong too, is they just have really strong assumptions, thinking that everybody wants this thing. And then it's a matter of like, if they do confirm that, well, then it's like, okay, does this work the way we think it will for the people it's intended for? I guess that's the beauty of the agile movement versus the waterfall. And I worked in both. I started when it was all waterfall. We would take a contract, and I'm serious, it'd be like a year later, see you in a year, while we build this thing. After you've already paid us, hundreds of thousands of dollars, see you in a year. And then by the time we launch, it's like completely different. It's gone through so many iterations. It's like, what the heck is this? This is not anything we imagined. So I guess that's the beauty, the reinforcement, the beauty of how, we've been able to iterate a lot more in this field and make it and kind of confirm our assumptions a lot better.
And I guess out of respect for, and he mentions this too, out of respect, there's maybe like civil engineering, or if you actually were building a house per se, you couldn't just build it and be like, oh, actually, we should have did double doors in the front, and we should have totally remapped the lighting and then like redo it all, where you won't have that exactly. So I see that too, where physically with code, sometimes you are literally tearing everything down, and that's also part of what he calls out, where it's part of our responsibility to account for that cost as well. You can't just be willy-nilly designing things. That was one of the things that he called out in terms of a bad design, is that you design something that you can't even build.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think it's fitting that kind of in the book at this point, when he talks about all this aspect is in that, when he also talks about empathy, and I think it goes both ways too. You have to have empathy with your user, and then also empathy with all the different teams. And I think, Tiffany, you were bringing it up, that aspect of the marketing team, the design team, that having empathy with all of that. And so kind of our jobs is to understand the user, but then also to understand the different teams as well, and kind of understanding really what their work looks like, as far as what we do, how that impacts kind of the work that they do. So I thought that was fitting that kind of in with all this, when we're talking about those kind of different job functions, that's where he decided to talk about empathy, in that as well. And user defenders is no stranger to empathy, right? Empathy is a superpower.
That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
It's a few of my favorite things.
Yeah. Well, and Jason, you were talking just about iteration and kind of moving forward and kind of keeping things progressing. So one of the questions that I had with this, as we're kind of coming up to end on time, was, so he wrote this book in ’88 and then revised it in 2013, and then kind of talks about the future of, 50 years from now. I was just curious as to what y'all would think, that if this book was being written 50 years from now, so what would that be, like 2070? What do you think some of the changes would be to the book? So like some of the sections. So like one of the things that I was thinking is that there probably would be a huge section on language, with voice commands, and that being something that's coming up. so prevalently. I would think that voice would be something that he would focus on. But then also too, kind of talking about the similarities and differences between the real world and immersive or digital worlds. I think that that's something that could be really interesting coming forward, that if we do go to these really all-encompassing digital worlds, if there are different conventions there, different things that people follow. So like really kind of being in those spaces, if there are stark similarities or stark differences between the real world and those. So that's what I was thinking that could come about in the next 50 years. What about y'all? What do you kind of see as the burgeoning things that maybe this book, even being written 6 years ago, might not have touched on, that's starting to become big?
Interesting.
C says add AI section.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely agree.
That's
I
gonna
think
be
the book would be.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
I was
you
gonna
first.
say that's gonna be a whole different spin on memory.
Yeah.
I very much liked how he explained, as you guys mentioned, that, you know, freeing up memory. So now if you're freeing up, you know, strategy, let's say, because you have smart AI, what that then allows everyone to do instead.
Yeah, I think the book is going to would be a lot shorter. I think it will be because this is all about physical objects. It's all about physical objects. I believe we are entering into an era with technology and where we are not going to see as many physical objects. I believe that a lot of our lives are going to continue to spiral into screens, being surrounded by screens everywhere we go. Like think Minority Report, he's in the mall. What does it do? It scans his retina. It knows exactly the ad that he needs to see at that given time. That movie is so old now, yet it's still so ahead of its time. And what we're seeing in Black Mirror, as much as I hate to use like Hollywood as an example, there's something to what we're seeing and that guy is some sort of prophet, because and that's what scares me, because if even half of the stories that he tells come true, I think we're in big trouble. But I honestly believe, since this book is entirely about physical objects and the psychology behind how we interact with physical objects, I really genuinely believe that this book would be cut in half, because it would be all about interacting with more of a digital kind of environment. I mean, everything is going into the cloud. I got to talk to a gal from Microsoft recently who's like really pioneering, who's on a team that's pioneering the future of computing. And some of the stuff that she mentioned to me was just even just the idea of our devices. Like we are so personal with our devices. Like there, a lot of young people like can't even sleep unless their device is under their pillow, right? Like, and that's just the reality. That's just the age we're growing up with. But she actually mentions about how we're entering into a device agnostic world. Where you can be in a mall, if anybody even goes to a mall anymore, or a public environment, there's a kiosk. If you need to check your email, walk up to the thing, it scans your retina or your fingerprint, and there it is right there. Whatever you need, that message you need. If it's not on your body in some way already, then it's just, I believe we're entering into an age where there's going to be a lot less physical design. Our world is already so crowded with things. It's crowded. There's a lot of people in this world. We're running out of space. Elon Musk is trying to get us to Mars because he's so concerned about it. I just believe that personally that we're going to see a radically different world 50 years from now than we even could imagine. It's my assumption.
So I'm gonna counter you, Jason, just a little bit. I think that while we are going towards a world where screens are becoming more prevalent and everything, I think it underscores the importance of well-designed physical objects. You talked about going up to a kiosk, it's a physical object. You talked about all these people have their actual physical devices. As we get more and more crowded and more entrenched with technology, the physical ways that we bring that technology, the physical way we bring that screen to us is going to become more and more important, and we're going to have to be able to do it more and more seamlessly. Case in point, we all have, laptops or phones or tablets, flights now. Yeah, we brought those screens closer to us, but we designed the physical presence of the technology such that we could keep it near us. So I think we're going to still see important needs for design physical objects.
Yeah, even in the world of non-physical artists, someone has to design it. So I think the concepts will still be there, because signifiers will be even more so important if you're not touching it. So does it light up? I mean, I think like Shibuya in Japan, and just Japan in general, everything has a sound. And then there's going to be some UX designer that's like, what if that person's deaf? Like, so I think that the concepts will still be there, but how we apply it will be, to your point, possibly virtual. With Samsung and just playing with VR, just the eye tracking and all of that, like people are still getting motion sickness from just playing with it, the weight of it. So I think we have kind of a long journey to get there, but those pieces, your senses, will still need to be designed and thought of.
I think about that a lot. And as Jason was talking, it made me think of the other way that it goes. But I was thinking of, how is it that the physical relates to what we see on the digital, like the save button is an old floppy disk, or we have the folder system is how we used to do it, like that. But then also, it works backwards to where now, if I have to throw something away, sometimes I catch myself saying, "Oh, I need to delete that," and it's a physical thing, and I'm trying to, get rid of it. So. So I think that both points are very valid, because I think that, as we're moving forward, it's building off of that framework of, the way that we got to digital, for better or for worse, is from the physical. But then that's so prevalent and that's so pervasive is that filters back into the physical as well. So there's definitely things that we're learning in the digital space that we can bring back to the physical space as well. Because at the end of the day, unless, something vastly changes, we're still very physical. We're up, moving around and all that kind of stuff until, maybe there's something planted in our brain that, stimulates everything like the Matrix and whatnot. But we're still in the physical world. So I think that y'all all have great points on how, both are, especially at this day and age, really reflecting and influencing each one, the physical to the digital and the digital to the physical as well.
Yeah, I really, not as far as Jason took it, but he used the typewriter and the layout of the keyboard so much that I'm really curious about when we just stop typing. And then, like, does anyone even going to remember the order of the keys on a keyboard?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, there's no handwriting in school anymore.
Yeah.
I think that C just mentioned in chat is a very similar point. The data is not going to be in our minds. The way we're interacting with technology is changing. So our mental processes, our brains are changing as we, get rid of certain actions. So how are we going to design for those new thought processes and things? That was a very interesting point. Thanks, C. Good luck. Looks like she's got to drop.
Yeah, he's got to go. This is super compelling. Ross, do we have time for the object?
Anybody? I think so too, and this will be a great way to use the chat too, as well, kind of moving forward if we don't have enough time for it all. But Jason had a great idea of, with this, kind of doing almost a little show and tell of coming on and bringing our favorite or our least favorite products that we use day in and day out, and maybe kind of explaining real quick, maybe 1 or 2 points on, what affordance that you enjoy or what signifier you don't dislike or anything like that. And so I was curious if anyone brought a show and tell item today on a product they love or they love to hate.
I did.
What is it?
I got one.
Okay, ready? Mine is this right here.
So you love or love to hate?
I love this.
Nice.
This is, anybody know what this is?
It looks like a zester, but I don't know.
It's a avocado slicer.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
It's an avocado slicer.
Oh my
This
goodness.
thing, my son got this for me. I love avocados. I typically eat one every morning, and it's by Oxo. I think they may have been mentioned in the book actually. It's or maybe they were mentioned in the Mismatch book actually. So this, my son got this for me, and it was a very thoughtful gift because basically what it does is it's all in one. It's 3-in-1 here. I use this object to slice the avocado. And then I use this object to remove the seed. You see the blades in there?
Mm-hmm.
Stick that in, remove the seed. And then this one right here, you scoop out, it scoops out and slices the avocado for you. This is my favorite designed object that I use every day. My least favorite is my microwave because I can't use the microwave when the timer's on the microwave. Somebody decided that if I have a timer, if the timer is being used on the microwave, then by God, you cannot microwave anything until that timer's done. Stupid.
It just becomes a really expensive stopwatch at that point.
Exactly. That's all I got.
Well, thank you for sharing, Jason. Appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm glad you came with that idea because I've been wanting to share this with someone since I got it. This is the bane of my existence. The Apple TV remote. I cannot tell you how many times I've lost it or rolled over and just lightly brushed it and it's paused and all. I am just fed up with this thing. So I was trying to think if it's, an affordance that it's responsive that I dislike. So it's like the affordance is that it's responsive or what? I don't know. But I absolutely cannot stand this thing. I want it to be a little bit bigger. I want it to be less responsive so that it only clicks whenever I want it to. But on the flip side of that is that I'm actually wearing some of my favorite stuff is the AirPods. And so it's still not quite there, but I love the way that as soon as I put them in, it links with kind of what's closest. And I think I've just realized too that if I'm on my computer and they're linked, but then I leave my computer, at a friend's house and come back to my phone and put them in, it'll then link with my phone. So almost the closest device. So I think that's where they could really take it to the next level is that somehow it just, really does a proximity thing and then we'll switch to that. Because right now I have to go into my phone and kind of select. But they're coming very close. So just that seamless aspect of working, I really like. So Apple gets both ends of the spectrum when it comes to love and hate.
How many times has the couch swallowed up your Apple TV remote?
Well, it's in my bedroom, so I'm always rolling over it,
Okay.
or it gets lost. And it's when you check the same place 3 times and it's there the 4th time. That's just like, how did I lose this thing? And so, and as you're looking for it, you hit something that slightly touches it, and so it pauses, and so it's there, but you just can't find it. So that's fine.
It's too responsive. And Don Norman said machines that give, and this could be machines or Apple TV remotes that give too much feedback are like backseat drivers. That's what that Apple remote, I totally agree. There's so many times where I've lost my place, can't find it, went too far forward, too far back, or paused it. I agree with you. There needs to be a better design to that.
Yeah. Well, Tiffany and Jamie, if y'all come up with one, feel free to put that in the chat. I know we're coming kind of close to end, so I want to be respectful of your time.
Sure.
So you can use that chat for that, but then also putting up the different videos we talked about or the books and whatnot. And like I mentioned before, if you want to go back and listen to some of the things that we were talking about, Jason and I will work on getting this recording cleaned up and put out there for you. But then we'll also, too, be on the lookout for some of the posts that we put as far as iterating. Jamie, before you got here, we were talking about really trying to iterate with the book club and see what the best way to make it so that more people are able to be involved and in real time or getting what it is they need. And so whether that's doing a couple chapters at a time as opposed to a huge book, or figuring out the best time that people can be together and how they use the resource and whatnot. But
Sure.
All it is from me. I'll open it to anyone else. If they have any last things or closing remarks.
I do have a love-hate device.
Oh.
I had to go run downstairs and get it. This is my PlayStation 4 controller.
Yeah.
Very aesthetic.
Uh-huh.
The color on this light changes depending on, if you're player 1 or player 2 or even the app that you're using. Ergonomic. It's nice.
Uh-huh.
There's a few significant problems here. If you're watching Netflix This X button will pause it. If you're watching YouTube, it won't. The mapping of the buttons to the functions in the different video streaming apps is completely off the charts. You have to what app you're in and then look up the chart, and then like completely out of whack. Wireless, that's handy until you need to charge the battery, and then you have to plug it in.
Yep.
And so if you're playing, suddenly you have to be, several feet closer to your to the console to plug it in. So you got to like quick. So.
Gotcha.
There's mine.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing. That's something we didn't even talk about, was conceptual mapping. And I think that was throughout this entire book, was that this huge thing is that if nothing else, just make sure the conceptual map is on point.
Yeah.
So yeah, we didn't even touch on that, but well, thank y'all so much for being here. Again, I want to respect y'all's time. I know y'all got other things to get to, but thank you so much for being here, and keep the conversation going on the chat and in the community. And I hope you can be a part of the next one. Looking forward to keeping the conversations with y'all going.
Great. Fabulous talk, guys. Thank you.
And I want to just say, Ross, you did a great job. So
thank you.
Yeah.
No problem.
Great job.
All right.
Well, see y'all, everybody. Fight on.
See you guys.
All right. Have a good one.